Segment three, Gold and Black Live. We're with Elliot Bloom, Director of Men's Basketball Administration and Operations. A title and length, but worthy of the job this guy has done for a long time for Purdue. And he and I have good offline conversations. We're going to have an online one here today, and that's always a pleasure from my standpoint. Elliot, welcome to the show. And just another Friday, just another basketball game tomorrow when Purdue takes on Arizona.
Yeah, just another game, another season. No, it's a good time of year. It's an exciting time, a good time to be a Boilermaker, and looking forward to. I wasn't sure what game was going to be the highlight of this season, non-conference wise.
Yeah.
It just shows you never know. You schedule these things, and you never know how they're going to materialize. And this is certainly one that's got everybody's attention, not just among our fan base, but across the nation.
You have been places where you've seen it. Now we've talked about this before in your past lives, not only being at Purdue, but also at Duke and in Kansas as well. Just talk about now. You guys have built yourself to a perennial, at least the last 3 years, and really longer than that. But in terms of that top 10 notion of what that's like, how much is that different now than it was even is it kind of how you imagine it, having experienced it in your younger days? What is it like to be sitting on that perch and everybody trying to knock you off on a daily basis as well?
Yeah, it's I think, and I mentioned this to a group of John Purdue Club members in Toronto. There was a brunch there the day of the game that I spoke to some people there. They had a couple hundred people in attendance at our team hotel, and I told them kind of this very thing about building a program, and like, okay, what's that look like? Like, a lot of people throw that phrase around, but what exactly does that mean? And as someone who's been around it now for a long time, and kind of been a couple hands on the rope pulling in that direction, I feel like it's all the things. It's a lot of things around the program that, like, for instance, this game, on Saturday in Indianapolis, it's a sellout. I told this same story last weekend. We played Louisville down there one year, and I think it was the Wooden Tradition, and there was an ice storm that Saturday, and we walked out to take the floor, and there was a lot of red in the stands, and there wasn't a lot of gold and black, and it really hit us like, man, what do we have to do? And that was the team with Robbie Hummel and Etuan. So we had a good team that year. We ended up winning that game. And afterwards, I remember talking to some fans, and they said, well, yeah, the ice storm. And I said, well, Louisville had to drive through that same ice storm. Like, that was a thing for them too. So it really kind of hit us in the face, like, hey, we gotta put a product out there that you just can't refuse. And it's taken time, but I think over the last handful of years, we've gotten to that point. We've certainly gotten to that point in Mackey. We've gotten to that point in a lot of our MTE tournaments where now if I make a phone call to try to get into an event 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's like, yep, let me put Purdue in as soon as we can. And that comes from our fans and the fans that travel, and the fact that they know that when Purdue shows up to the gym, we're going to have a few hundred fans in tow. That makes a huge deal, and that's what great programs do. That's what the Duke, the Carolinas, the Kentuckys, the Kansases, that's what they do. When they show up to gyms, they bring a ton of fans. They have a lot of interest around their program. They have that little number next to their name, and hopefully the lower the number, the better. That's what big time programs do. And as you try to grow your program, that's one of the things that you try to do. And to do that, you have to get players, and you have to have a very talented team year in, year out that can compete for big things. And we've done that the last handful of years. We're, as everybody knows, we're trying to climb that mountaintop at the end of the year, like every team in the country is. And you and I've talked about it before, that if you have all these things around your program and you build your program to a certain level, everybody's trying to scale the mountain. Well, you get to start a little bit higher on the mountain than other teams. The teams that are in the 300s in the net rating, they're starting way down there. We're starting a little bit above base camp. And when I first got here, we weren't. We were lower on the mountain as we try to climb that thing every year. So it's all those things you can do around your program to kind of put you in a position every year to get a great net rating, a great seeding in the NCAA tournament, and then make your run in March. And hopefully you win a lot of games along the way. And if you're fortunate, you can win a league tournament or a regular season conference title, and have really good players and play in great games and make a lot of great memories and things for fans along the way. So that's all goes into building an elite program, in at least the way I look at it.
Yeah, you're an operations guy, but you're also a major role with the players on this team because you just are ingrained in everything that goes on. Look at on Wednesday night, Chicago State beats Northwestern. This is the world of college basketball.
Right,
and I think
right.
it's not to get into psychoanalysis, but just the interesting part of that in terms of dealing with that uncertainty is you don't know. Yes, Purdue's playing Arizona on Saturday, but you're going to have to play Jacksonville State and Eastern Kentucky, and I know that's down the road, but that's just that mentality and how you guys deal with that as a staff. Is that anything's possible in this game, and you have to be wary of pitfalls, but you also have to look at opportunities, almost equal those out as you move forward.
No doubt, and I actually like that. Those always happen this time of year. You get a handful of teams that stub their toe because they're already on break, and mentally they're probably somewhere else. Those always come up. Every year I keep a running list of those games. So you can bet that next week when we're prepping for, the Jacksonville and the Eastern Kentucky, those are going to get brought up, and I'll hand Coach Painter a list that'll have all those teams that, a list of those games, and he'll say, hey, it's not just lip service. Like, this happens year in, year out to teams that don't stay mentally focused until the last day of break, and then get away for 4 or 5 days and get your mind off of things. But until then, let's focus on the task at hand. And we're in a day and age where young people, their attention's more divided than ever. I don't think I'm exactly breaking news by saying
No.
we're all guilty of that to some respect with our phones and everything, and our faces buried in our phone all the time. So it's a more of a challenge to keep people locked in. And I would also say that in this day and age, the way teams are assembled, you have teams that haven't been together as long. And so we've been very fortunate to be at the low end of turnover and the high end of retention over the last few years, and in all of college basketball, not just among Big Ten teams, but really nationally, we've had as low a turnover as you're going to find. And that's a big deal because our guys now understand what's the way we operate, what's expected of them, how to approach each game, how to prepare for each game. And there's teams around the country that are still figuring that out. They're still learning about their head coach. They may have only played 8 or 9 games for their current head coach, and they're trying to figure out what makes him tick and what does he want from me as an individual player. We don't have a lot of those questions in our locker room. Our guys pretty much know what's expected of them, what Coach Painter wants, what our staff wants, how we go about our business. I said after we played Alabama, I said, that's a really, really good team. And I think they're just going to get better and better as the year goes on. But they've got a lot of new pieces. They've played 8 or 9 games together this year. I have a feeling that in a few years, you're going to see a lot of lobbying from teams to try to do a foreign trip every year. So teams can really try to gel quicker. They don't have to wait till, September 25th to begin that process, because I think that's a real thing. And it's going to be more of a challenge year in, year out for teams that spend so much time in the portal to try to get their teams, on the same page and solidified as quickly as they can.
One of the many hats you wear, we've talked, is scheduling, and that started. You guys went to Europe this year and competed, and it's been the process of that. I know goes years in advance, but you also have run a gauntlet here and somebody in some other podcast talked about the fact that you're not even going to, and this is not underestimating what you might see in the NCAA tournament, but when you start with Xavier, Gonzaga, Tennessee, who was it?
Marquette,
Alabama, Arizona. Hard to imagine it's going to be any more difficult in the NCAA tournament, no matter who you face. But talk about that design and knowing what your team is, or what you hoped your team would be at this point in time, and how that scheduling has worked out. That's so there's some strategery, so to speak, in that process.
Yeah, and it started too going down to Arkansas and playing that exhibition
Yeah.
game. That was a great lesson for our guys, and it was one too that I know Brian's documented it pretty well that we didn't necessarily have a full prep for that game. That was a little bit by design. Not the worst thing to lose those exhibition games. I know sometimes fans hear that and they scratch their head and they can't understand that, and that's okay. It's not for them to understand. It's it's one of those things where going down there, no matter the outcome, if you win by 40, if you lose by 40, it was going to be a great experience for our guys because for two reasons. You go into a real environment, a true road environment that we saw in Evanston,
Yeah.
but we haven't seen a true road environment like we will, coming up after the new year. But also the kind of team that Arkansas is, a long athletic team that plays with, five athletes on the floor at the same time. They get up and down, fast paced, defensively challenging, trying to take us out of the stuff that we do. That game really helped pay dividends for Xavier, who has one of the fastest paces of play in the country and got up and down. Gonzaga, same thing. Tennessee, same thing. Marquette, same thing. I mean, it's like a broken record. There's a lot of I don't want to say it's a trend, but it's kind of a trend in college basketball to really get up and down, a little bit more than normal, fast-paced offenses, things of that nature. You're seeing more teams go that route, and so for us, that was important to get exposed to that early. We knew the schedule was going to be loaded with teams like that. And the schedule was put together with big names. We can't take credit for all of it because Maui was kind of served up to us, right?
Yeah.
So we got in the Maui field a few years ago, but it happened to be a great year because all those teams happened to be having good seasons on this particular season. So it was great to get tested with a variety of those teams. Tennessee's more of a defensive-minded team. Alabama's more of an offensive-minded team. Both SEC teams that have a lot of athletes, well coached. So we feel like we've had a lot of different experiences. As we look at film leading into this game, Arizona might be the most talented team that we played to date. So another challenge, and a team that has probably the most talented front line of anybody we've seen so far. So yet, another new wrinkle that we have to kind of adapt to. It's safe to say that we'll get through this non-conference, and then when we get through the Big Ten, there will probably not be a type scenario or team that we won't have faced as we head towards postseason way down the road. So, all that stuff is really great to prepare you and stuff for March, but it also challenges you going into the Big Ten season. We've said, Coach Painter said it as long as he's been here, if you can compete for a Big Ten title, you're going to be able to compete for a high seed and compete to get to a Final Four. And that's at the end of the day what we want.
Yeah. All right, David Neff and Mark Carney were our last segment guests. NIL, collectives, all these things that you're a guy that always flies the jet, as Gene Katie would say, looking 5 years ahead. But I don't think in 2018 you saw this happening as smart as you are. But tell me about what, David just getting started in this role as the president and CEO of the Boilermaker Alliance. But you've had a little bit of time, even though it's still a moving target, all of it is. But where are you seeing this, and what do you think is really going to be important? If you're David Neff in this job, what does he have to deliver that will help not only Purdue men's basketball, but athletics as well?
Yeah, I think, you're going to have to be nimble, number one, because, these seismic changes that have happened at the NCAA level, if any one of those changes would have come to fruition, it would have been a lot of dealing with, let alone all of them at the same time. We had conference realignment, you had the portal, you had name, image, likeness, you have the NCAA who, let's be honest, President Baker's probably the Hail Mary to try to save the NCAA in its current structure.
Yeah.
If he can't get done what he wants to get done through the power of 5 conferences or 4 conferences now, dissolve the NCAA and go their own way. There's a lot of TBDs. And so I think Dave and Mark and, Dave's taken over now is going to have to be really nimble and be willing to be able to, learn how to pivot quickly and move on to the next thing if he needs to. There's obviously talk of some legislation in Congress of trying to get a little bit of a hold on NIL. and moderate that to a certain extent. I don't know if that'll be successful. If their track record's any indicator, we may be waiting a while.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that could change down the road, but in the immediate right now here, at Purdue, and how he can help make an impact, it's obviously getting funding and getting that base growing in the collective. There's some other collectives around the country that have a lot of members that necessarily don't give huge amounts, but collectively it turns into a nice amount. And I think if there's anybody that's watching this, or is a Purdue supporter and wants to see us continue to be successful, wants to see football, get players and compete at a high level as they move into the West and East now being all part of one, and a new phase in what Big Ten's and what the Big Ten's going to look like. Consider jumping in on the collective and helping us out in that regard. And it doesn't have to be a huge amount of money. I think there's room in this space for that Purdue grad who lives in out in Las Vegas, and he can't get back, or she can't get back for games all the time. So really, what's my incentive to be a high level John Purdue Club member if I'm not getting the points and the tickets and the seating and the parking? I'm not coming back for games. The collective's a great way to help, and it's a great way to kind of have a donation, like kind of Netflix style, where it's a monthly installment, and you really don't miss it at the end of the day, unless you really scrutinize your credit card bill, and then you might. But if you can do it and you can help out in that regard, a little bit goes a long way. And I think that's one of the goals that they're going to have, is to continue to grow that number and be able to support the teams.
All right. One of the couple more questions as we come to the end of this segment, but want to talk about, again, juggling that notion of Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and USC. What do you see scheduling looking like? Is that, I know there's still some a lot of moving parts in that, I would assume, as you get to 24, 25 in that first year of those teams being in this league. Yeah. How do you see that landing, or what needs to be done to get that figured out?
Yeah, the first thing we got to get figured out as a league is how many conference games we're going to. Do we want to stay at 20? Do we want to go to 21, 22? What's that going to look like? I think they're getting closer to a decision there that will at least give us the blueprint. We're scheduling for next season right now. And so with the Gavitt games going away, the ACC Challenge going away, there's a bigger challenge on our end to try to get some home and homes established so we can continue to see good teams for us to play, but also good teams for our fans to see in Mackey every year. We've always tried to get at least one marquee non-conference home game that we feel like would be an attractive game to get fans to, and things of that nature. So we're going to continue to work towards that, but it really helps to know how many league games you're playing before you get too far down the road on that stuff. And we hope to have an answer relatively soon in that regard, and that will allow us to know kind of how to schedule accordingly. The other piece is just who we're going to play, how many times. If you stay at 20 games, everybody's going to have a protected rival, and then you're going to have a lot more single plays than you would this year. This year I think we have 6 single plays. We'll go to more, obviously, as you add more teams, and so there'll be some years where there's an imbalance of the schedule, but that's just the way it's going to be. People are going to have to get over that. And if you win the league on a year where you maybe played a little less saltier schedule, so be it. Don't apologize. Take your trophy and celebrate it. And on the flip side of that, if you played all the big boys in a certain year and you thought maybe you had a little unfair slate, that's part of it. That's the new day and age we're in. So, you try to worry about the things you can control. About going west, I think that we're going to have a lot easier than the teams out west. They're going to have to come our way a lot more. I think the league is going to be pretty creative in terms of working with people and with teams, and to create scenarios that work. What I mean by that is, if there's a West Coast school that says, you know what, based on our semester setup, and I don't know if those schools are quarters or semesters, I'm not sure, but let's say they say, you know what, we're actually off from classes this week. Why don't you send us east and we'll play 3 games. We'll do a 3-game swing and knock out Maryland, Rutgers, and Penn State. We'll do it all in one swing, and then we'll head back west. If they would propose those kind of things, and it works in the schedule and the TV structure, and that's a lot of things, a lot of boxes to check. But if that happens, I could see the league partnering with schools and helping them out in that regard. I think when we go west, it sounds like we're probably going to go to LA and play both teams, or go north and play both teams. But there probably won't be a scenario where you go west in January and then west again in February. I think they're going to have it set up where you're going to go west one time and be able to knock out whoever you're going to knock out, and then head back and get back acclimated to stuff around here. So that's all how it's kind of sounding right now. I know some of it's up in the air, and it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. And we'll be getting to know those teams really well, because they'll be my first phone call when I ask them what hotels we're staying at and how things work out there on the travel. So
I think AI is going to come in handy. I don't know how you figure just the logistics of all that is going to be. Somebody's gonna have to plug that in somewhere and see how that can work out. It's fascinating on that set. Last question. Obviously, Indianapolis is a big focus of Purdue athletics, Purdue University. Clearly, we know that already. And your desire to continue. Obviously, when you have a marquee game like a Saturday against Arizona, it doesn't get any bigger than that. But that I assume is, even through all this 21, 22 games or whatever you can play in the Big Ten, still going to remain a focus of yours to have a presence in that city.
Yeah, we always want to get down to Indy. And I think the Indy Classic's getting some momentum. I mean, it's helped that, us in Arizona have sold the place out for this year, which will be a big day. Ball State, Indiana State, and the other game of that. As we talk with the Indianapolis Sports Corp and trying to continue to grow that, I hope our fans feel like that's an annual thing that we should be doing, because we certainly feel that way. And I love hearing the stories of when fans talk about how they make that part of their annual tradition, whether it's going to Indy and going out to eat, watching us play, tying in some shopping to it, whatever it might be. That's kind of the premise behind it. We always enjoyed it. It's the end of finals week. Our guys can kind of exhale and relax a little bit academically. We head down to Indy to play that game. It's always kind of been a good time of year for us. We hope our fans feel the same way. It certainly seems like they do, at least for this weekend. We hope next year can continue. It will be hard to continue to get opponents the caliber of Arizona. That's just the blunt truth. The reason being is that with Arizona, we're going to return that game next year in Las Vegas. And what ends up happening is we can't return a game every year, because then you start stacking up returns, and then it eliminates chances to bring good teams to Mackey, because those have to be returned as well. So there'll be some years where we'll do returns and you'll see a really good opponent. There'll be other years where you'll see a good opponent, maybe not top 5 opponent, but you'll see a good opponent. And those are probably the years we don't have to return that game. So it'll be a little bit of a mix over the next few years, but it's certainly a game that we want to continue to keep on the schedule.
Yeah, no question. It is going to be a as big a game as Purdue has had in terms of at least numbers next to your name. 1 versus 3 is never happened in Purdue basketball history. So that's a cool thing from that standpoint, at least from the Boilers being ranked 3rd heading into number 1 opponent. All right, we wish you well and safe travels always. And
I did want to bring up something.
Yes, so go ahead, by all means.
You talked about the beginning, growing a program, and this will be a little bit of a plug too. So it's not totally selfless. So this year at the end of May and June, we're starting a fantasy camp, Purdue basketball fantasy camp. We announced it, I guess about a month ago on social media. And again, that's another one of those layers to a program, and a handful of programs do this across the country. But this will be a 4-day, 35 and older camp. It'll be for basically anybody who's really into basketball or really into Purdue. If you check either of those boxes, this will be a camp that'll be right up your alley. We're going to have guys come in, put them up over at the Union. They're going to get a ton of Purdue gear. Our coaches are going to coach the camp. We're going to have a lot of former players back. When we set this up, it was right around the beginning of the year when we announced it, because Robbie Hummel had our opener against Samford, and he said, Bloom, that fancy camp, what a great idea. And I could tell what he was hinting at. I go, well, dude, you're on my list to call because I want you to come back and work it. He goes, oh, great. Because I was going to ask you, can I come back and work it? So we're going to get a lot of our former kind of player legends to come back and work, help coach. You're going to be immersed in our locker room, film room, training room, play competition in Mackey and Cardinal Court, practice with our coaches. It'll be really, really cool. We're going to have some evenings where we'll have some nice dinners. We're going to go out to Coach Painter's house for a cookout one day. So it'll be a true behind the scenes Purdue basketball experience. So I know there's a lot of your readers and listeners and watchers and everybody out there that are obviously diehards. So if anybody wants to give a great Christmas gift, that would be make a Purdue fan's year, I would think.
All right. Well, they can do that. Is there any link or any place to go just yet for that?
Yeah, PurdueBasketballCamps.com has all of our summer camp information, and that's on there as well. It takes you to the Purdue Fantasy Camp. PurdueBasketballFantasyCamp.com is our site. You can print off an application there and send it to the basketball office. And we're getting them coming in right now and getting a pretty good list together. I talked to a gentleman out in Hawaii that was with the John Purdue Club. And he said, I think I might be getting a little bit older. And I said, well, we're not having professionals come here. Like Rob's going to be working the camp. He's not playing in the camp. I said, so it'll be a good time. And our coaches are all looking forward to it as well.
Just make sure your liability insurance is paid up. I'm talking about for the members. I'm 29 years too old for that. I think it'd be it sounds like a great idea and a fun group of people too, though. Whoever gets a chance to do that will have an absolute blast, I'm sure. So I appreciate that shameless plug. It's not shameless at all. That's very relevant to our group. So anyway, wish you happy holidays, and you and your group with the Purdue men's basketball always treat us and Brian and Carm and everybody else about as good as any outfit can do, and we appreciate that so much. I want to thank State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com and XXX on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. The good folks at WLFI, also Gordon Jackson and Mary. Wish you happy holidays. We'll be back with our weekly shows. We might even have Mr. Bloom on to talk a little more about that fantasy camp late in the season, but we'll be back with our weekly show second week of January as well. So have a great holiday, everybody. Thanks again for watching and listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you after the new year in 2024. So again, thanks so much.